For 14 years, Bolivia was invisible. No golden visa and a pegged currency nobody trusted. But that changed just 6 months ago. IMI contributor Edwin Hudepol argues that Bolivia offers far more than what most investors think. Zero foreign income tax, no investment threshold, USDT banking, and a passport in 4 years that unlocks regional settlement rights. What changed? Who does Bolivia fit? And what else should you know about the Tibet of the Americas? We'll cover all of it. To understand why Bolivia matters, you have to understand why advisors stopped looking at it in the first place. The country pegged its currency, the Boliviano, at 6.96 per US dollar back in 2011. For over a decade, the peg held while commodity revenues filled the central bank's reserves. But by 2025, the foundation had cracked. The central bank's foreign reserves had collapsed from roughly 12.7 billion US dollars in 2014 to 171 million US dollars. And as a result, a parallel currency market emerged. The unofficial rate hit 20 Bolivianos per US dollar by May 2025, nearly 3 times the official rate. Importers couldn't pay foreign suppliers. Banks rationed dollar withdrawals, and inflation reached 25%. Hudepol's framing is straightforward. For the global residency and citizenship market, Bolivia became unbankable in practice. Even if the residency rules had been favorable, no advisor was placing a serious applicant into a country where the official price level was fictional and dollars couldn't move freely. Then came the election. Rodrigo Paz won the October 2025 presidential runoff, ending 14 years of socialism headed by Evo Morales. In Hudepol's reading, the new administration moved quickly on monetary and crypto policy in a way that has now reshaped Bolivia's macro picture in mere months. 3 things happened in sequence. 1. The government adopted a floating exchange rate, and the parallel market rate stabilized around 9 Bolivianos per US dollar. 2. The central bank formalized stablecoin integration into the regulated banking system, building on a July 2025 cooperation agreement with El Salvador. 3. And finally, both Fitch and S&P upgraded Bolivia's sovereign rating. The market reacted faster than the rating agencies. Bolivia's sovereign risk spread fell roughly 75% from a peak of around 2,200 basis points in April 2025 to under 500 by February 2026, which is one of the fastest regional declines on record. Bolivia is still elevated against peers like Uruguay or Chile, but Hudepol argues the trajectory is what matters here. For the first time since 2011, Bolivia's monetary policy direction is legible. And the price level isn't artificial. That's the macro condition you need before any of the residency or tax mechanics become worth discussing. So, how does a no investment route actually work in practice? Because we did mention this is essentially a free path to citizenship. Bolivian residency is governed primarily by Law 370 and Supreme Decree 1923 from 2014, both of which have been amended several times in the past 4 years. The parent statute, however, has been stable. The accessibility of the framework is what's improved through digitization and procedural reform. 2 pathways are available to most international investor applicants. The first is a 1-year temporary visa under what's called the sufficient funds route. The applicant signs a sworn statement of intent to develop an activity in Bolivia, supported by bank statements showing roughly 4,800 US dollars in available funds or about 400 US dollars in monthly recurring income. No need for a local company or investment, just proof of self-sufficiency. The catch with the 1-year route is renewals. From year 2 onward, you typically need a verifiable basis of presence, like a services contract from a Bolivian company, an employment contract, or active independent contractor registration. Each renewal requires similar documentation and fee structures, which is why the second pathway is typically cleaner. The 3-year temporary visa is issued directly when the applicant has either a services contract from a Bolivian Sociedad de Responsabilidad Limitada, the local equivalent of an LLC, or an employment contract from a Bolivian company. Most self-directed applicants form their own SRL. Setup takes 1 to 2 weeks, and the minimum capital requirement is nominal. That single step eliminates renewals until year 3. To preserve the residency clock toward permanent status or citizenship, holders have to be in Bolivia at least 275 days per calendar year, with absences capped at 90 days. A formal extension can raise that absence allowance to 180, but it has to be approved well in advance. Hudepol flags one operational caveat that applies across the entire framework, though. Bolivia has a gap between codified rules and how those rules are applied at the office level. Practice varies by city, by individual immigration officer, and over time. A document accepted in La Paz this quarter may be rejected in Santa Cruz the next. For an advisor placing an applicant into Bolivia, his view is that the desk research and a single legal opinion are not enough. You need live operational knowledge from active casework, ideally across both major cities. This is exactly the kind of jurisdiction where IMI sovereigns lean on our Ask the Experts feature. Direct access to vetted immigration attorneys and program specialists working active files on the ground. Links in the description to join the private investor community. Now, after 3 continuous years of temporary residency, 2 options open up, both permanent residency and citizenship. Citizenship requires passing a written examination on Bolivian history and civic education in Spanish only, with no waiver mechanism. Foreign Relations Ministry processing typically takes around 12 months. On top of that, total elapsed time from initial residency filing to passport in hand is therefore roughly 4 to 4.5 years. That places Bolivia in the same band as Paraguay, where the standard is 3 years on PR plus citizenship processing. And yes, it is slightly slower than Argentina's nominal 2-year track, though Argentina now imposes strict zero departure presence requirements that effectively extend the practical timeline. Now, the Bolivian passport itself is mid-tier, with visa-free or visa-on-arrival access to roughly 80 destinations. In Hudepol's view, the strategic value sits less in the travel document and more in the legal standing it confers. Specifically, Mercosur residence agreement settlements rights across 9 South American countries. That's the hidden gem in this story. 1 naturalization, 9 jurisdictions where you can settle after a simple birth certificate and criminal record check. For non-Spanish-speaking applicants, permanent residency may be the more realistic endpoint. Once granted, the holder can be absent from Bolivia for up to 2 consecutive years without losing status. That converts Bolivia from a presence-heavy jurisdiction during the qualifying period to a presence-light one once you're through it. The other reason to screen Bolivia, in Hudepol's analysis, is the tax structure. Bolivia has a territorial tax system, just like Paraguay. Income earned outside Bolivia is not subject to local personal income tax, regardless of whether the funds are remitted into the country. But several pieces of the framework matter. There's no personal capital gains tax on individuals, broadly, not just on crypto, which we'll discuss again in a minute or two. Foreign source capital gains for a Bolivian resident are entirely outside the local tax net. There's no exit tax on unrealized gains. The only effective departure charge is a 190 Boliviano airport fee, about $20, and there are no controlled foreign corporation rules. A Bolivian resident holding foreign companies is not taxed on those companies' undistributed profits. There is one explicit carve-out from the territorial principle, and according to Hudepol, it's a very important question for high net worth applicants. Bolivia has a wealth tax called the IGF on residents with global net wealth of more than $4.3 million. Rates run from 1.4% at entry, threshold up to 2.4% on net wealth above $7.2 million. But listen, the IGF is on a path to repeal. Newly elected President Paz announced abrogation in November 2025 and submitted submitted the proposal to the legislature in February 2026, but on February 11th, the Chamber of Deputies Planning Commission rejected the IGF repeal for lack of consensus. The parallel repeal of the financial transactions tax was approved at the same session. As of writing, the IGF is still in force and should be assumed active for any applicant structuring entering 2026. If you're tracking how policy is changing in jurisdictions like Bolivia, where the timelines keep shifting, the IMI Daily YouTube channel and newsletter will get you the changes as they happen. Subscribe so you don't miss a beat. Now, perhaps the clearest differentiator in the regional market is something almost all Latin American jurisdictions can't claim. Bolivia has formalized stablecoin services into its regulated banking system. As of April 2026, 3 Bolivian banks offer USDT-related services, with 2 distinct operational models. Banco Bisa launched true USDT custody in October 2024 through a product called CryptoBisa. Account holders hold, buy, and sell USDT directly within their bank account interface. Banco FIE launched its own custody product, Cuenta Crypto, in April 2026. Comparable model, institutional custody, integrated wallet, direct buy and sell within the bank's mobile platform. PCP Bolivia, the local subsidiary of Peru's Banco de Crédito, runs a transactional rather than custodial model. Account holders convert Bolivianos to USDT specifically to execute same-day international transfers, capped at around $10,000 per transaction. CryptoBisa and Cuenta Crypto give the resident a regulated stablecoin custody position equivalent to a US dollar-denominated savings vehicle, with the holdings sitting inside the regulated bank itself. The BCP model, on the other hand, gives the resident a fast remittance rail but no custody position. Bolivia's central bank lifted its long-standing crypto ban in June 2024. Crypto transactions through the formal banking channel rose roughly 12 times between July 2024 and May 2025. For instance, foreign automakers like Toyota, Yamaha and BYD have accepted USDT for vehicle purchases in Bolivia since September 2025, and the state energy company has used stablecoins for cross-border energy settlement since 2025. Most Latin American jurisdictions still require workarounds like offshore exchange accounts, OTC desks, and parallel banking. Hudepol's point is that Bolivia integrates the function directly into the resident's primary banking relationship. Access begins once your cedula is issued. Let's pause for a second. This is IMI, and IMI doesn't sell jurisdictions on their residency or citizenship products. Hudepol, as well, is candid about 5 friction points investors must be aware of. The first is the FATF grey list, to which Bolivia was added in June 2025, with continued grey list status confirmed at the February 2026 plenary. The cited deficiencies relate to anti-money laundering compliance, beneficial ownership transparency, and narcotics-related financial risks. The practical consequence is that international banks dealing with Bolivian counterparties apply enhanced due diligence, and some institutions de-risk grey-listed jurisdictions entirely. Removal typically takes 2 to 4 years. The second is the IGF wealth tax, which we covered a moment ago. Until the repeal goes through, ultra-high net worth applicants with substantial global asset bases face material exposure on worldwide net wealth above $4.3 million. Paraguay, by comparison, has no wealth tax. The third is a 2% financial transactions tax on US dollar transfers, leaving via the banking system. The Chamber of Deputies Planning Commission approved the repeal in February of this year, but enactment isn't yet final. The fourth is language. The naturalization examination is in Spanish only with no waiver. Day-to-day administrative engagement runs nearly 100% in Spanish. Hudepol notes that English fluency among service providers is meaningfully lower than in Panama, Argentina, or Costa Rica. The fifth and final is political reversal risk. The Paz government took office in November. As of writing, the administration is just 6 months old. The president's party holds roughly 1/3 of the Chamber of Deputies and a similar share of the Senate, governing through a centre-right coalition rather than a single-party majority. The IGF repeal vote where coalition partners didn't align with the executive's position, shows that even high-priority executive proposals are not guaranteed to pass. Now, within the Mercosur frame, Hudepol places Bolivia, Paraguay and Argentina in three distinct positions. Paraguay sells the lowest friction residency at the highest price point through its new Investor Pass, which we'll cover in detail in our video. Paraguay announces $150,000 path to passport in 3 years. Argentina offers the fastest naturalization timeline, but with the strictest presence enforcement. Bolivia is right in between them. No investment threshold, 4 to 4.5 years to citizenship, but with the wealth tax pending repeal, the Spanish language requirement, and the FATF grey list banking environment that the other two don't impose. None of these is universally better. The fit depends on the investor. Hudepol's profile for Bolivia covers crypto holders who value bank-integrated USD custody, applicants comfortable with Spanish, applicants planning to spend most of the year on the ground, and those targeting territorial tax with a low cost of living. His broader argument, and one he wants you to leave with, is that Bolivia, after years of being analytically off the map, is now a jurisdiction that should be evaluated if you're building a Latin American investment portfolio. In Hudepol's words, the absence of an investment program is no longer a reason to skip the country. But Bolivia is just one Mercosur path. There are 8 others. If you want the full picture of how the Mercosur Residence Agreement actually works and which southern cone countries offer the cleanest pathways to using it, the video on your screen now walks through the whole block and its residency and citizenship routes. Subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you don't miss the next analysis. We're the only organisation providing this unbiased look at geopolitics and investment migration.